Hi, Dean Hummels. Oh, I think you're frozen. Can you hear me? I think that'll work. Just a
You
little
think
bit
so?
of a lag, I think.
Okay.
Just a little bit of a lag.
Well, let me do this. Let me turn my Wi-Fi back on and see if that helps. Okay.
For sure.
All right. We're having
Much better.
some internet challenges. Having some internet challenges
Awesome.
here. So yeah. It's always timed.
Lovely technology.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it goes.
Right when you need it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get started here. For those of you who don't know, my name is Kent Berkman. I am a rising junior in Krannert, double majoring in marketing and Spanish. And I am joined today by Dean Hummels, the Dr. Samuel R. Allen Dean of the Krannert School of Management for the second week. Thanks so much for being with us, Dean Hummels.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Really enjoyed it the first time and looking forward to our conversation.
Awesome. So our topic today for this Instagram Live is about data. And Purdue's a pretty STEM-focused school, and Krannert implements that STEM focus pretty heavily with a focus on data. Could you tell us why that is?
Sure. So, I think, if you, as we're constructing experiences and curriculum for our students, it's important for us to be thinking not just about what's happening today in the world, but what's going to be happening over the coming decades, because you're training now for, really a lifetime of work. And so it can be a little bit difficult guessing what the future will hold. But I think one thing that we can say with near certainty is that the use of data to drive decision making in business is only going to grow and grow and grow. So when you look at how this all works in business today, increasingly businesses have an extraordinary amount of information about almost everything they do, about their customers, about their production processes, about their employees and hiring practices, almost anything else you can think of. And they're really just at the cusp of figuring out, how do I use all of that rich data to make better decisions, to make me more competitive, to differentiate me relative to my competitors. And we think that we are better at that and better at teaching the necessary skills to succeed in that environment than any school in the world. And as a result of that, we are focusing on the use of data in all of our degree programs, because it doesn't matter what you want to do. If you want to be in human resources, if you want to be in finance or operations or any other kind of, or marketing or any other kind of area of any other kind of business discipline, you're going to need to be highly effective in using data and understanding the use of data to drive decisions.
Right, for sure. And I know that you mentioned it's implemented in all of our degrees, but one of the degrees that's kind of unique to Krannert and implements the STEM and data focus a little bit more is that industrial management degree.
That's right.
Could you speak about that a little bit?
Sure. So, the industrial management degree has long been a degree that students take and then go on to have tremendous success. So most of the CEOs who graduated out of Krannert have gone through that industrial management degree. The idea of it at its heart is to join the best parts of the science and engineering on campus with the management and business skills that we teach within Krannert. So we've actually been undergoing a process of sort of transforming that degree. We're actually renaming it Integrated Business and Engineering. And the idea behind it at the end of the day is students will have a very solid grounding in kind of core concepts and capabilities connected to engineering and business, and have a whole set of experiences that join those things together. In other words, it's not just about a set of courses you take, but about how, showing students how to draw on capabilities from STEM disciplines and capabilities from management disciplines, and how those two things taken together can solve bigger and more interesting and more important problems than either one of the two different approaches can take on.
Right. And the nice thing about that degree too is it opens you up to so many different fields. I know graduates from industrial management who've gone into finance, who've gone into engineering. It just opens you up to so many different possibilities.
No, that's exactly right. And because it's, you know, I think the best possible degrees are not about providing you a narrow skill set to go into a particular occupation. They're about providing you with broader capabilities that enable you to follow, you know, sort of follow your imagination in terms of what you want to do in terms of your career. The reality is, I mean, I think we'd all like to imagine that at the age of 18 or 19 or 20, we know exactly what we want to do with ourselves for the next, you know, 50 years. I think
Right.
most of us don't know what we want to do for the next 5 years in a lot of cases. And so having degrees that build a really solid foundation that open up options all over the place, and that better prepares you to follow whatever passions you discover along the way. And it also, and actually, and this is sort of important in the current economic environment we're operating in, you don't want to be tied to only a single sector of the economy, because what we're seeing right now is some parts of the economy are just absolutely underwater, and some parts of the economy are stronger than they've ever been and thriving in this environment. And so degrees that enable you to say, I want to go in whatever direction I'm passionate about and whatever direction there are opportunities, those are pretty powerful opportunities, and that's what we really try to create.
And what are some of those courses, for those who might not know, that Cranert implements in our 7 undergrad majors that focus on data and STEM?
Yeah. So, you know, students will have, when they go through, there's a little bit of variation from degree to degree, depending on what we're trying to prepare you for. But students will get a sort of solid dose of learning how to work with data. So, so our courses in what are called quantitative methods are really about, you know, how do we collect data? How do we process it? How do we think about, you know, kind of start from well, actually, let me put it this way to you. I think this is maybe a simpler way to convey it. The process that we're trying to teach through a sequence of courses looks something like this. Start with a business problem, right? A business problem might be, who should I hire? Or should I open up a new division in Mexico? Or should I adopt some new innovation? So that's a business problem. I want to take that business problem and I want to convert it to a data problem, right? Mm-hmm. There's a question and I need an answer to that question, and that answer is going to be driven by data. And then once I've got that data problem, I then have a kind of data analysis step. Like, what is the most appropriate way to analyze the data to drive the answers to those important business questions? And then finally, how do I take those answers and translate them to business solutions? So if you think about every step of that process, there's an important set of skills and a set of experiences that take you through that. And we have coursework. When you look at the different courses, they're either on a specific part of that process, or they're about an opportunity to integrate all the way through that. So as an example, there's the data mine, the living and learning community, which is really about an opportunity to take students all the way through that process, from problem formation through data analysis and delivering solutions. We also have kind of so outside of the coursework, short experiential learning opportunities, things we call data dives, where students will have focused opportunities over the span of a week or sometimes just even a couple of days to tackle a real world problem that one of the companies that recruits from Cranert will come and present this problem, say, this is the thing we're trying to fix. Can you help us get insights into this? And students will do a sprint where they try to solve that. So all of these things are about, sometimes you're trying to learn a specific tool or a technique to help you with that. And sometimes you're learning how to integrate techniques to try and solve bigger problems.
Right. And I think
So let me ask you a question. So where are you at in your program now?
I'm a rising junior.
Rising junior. Which of these courses have you taken so far, and how's that gone for you?
So I've taken a couple. I've taken the CS 235, which is organizational computing. I've taken my calc classes and my 2 science requirements.
Okay.
So those are the first ones that come to my head when I think of data. But then I was also thinking about it, and a lot of the business courses that I've taken too have also weaved data and STEM focus into it. So like microeconomics, macroeconomics, you can definitely find it early on in the undergrad program for sure.
Well, so that's really great to hear, because that's exactly what we're going for. The way you want to think about this is not, I mean, I think there's an old-fashioned way of looking at it, which is, okay, you took a stats class, and,
Right.
and that was your experience, and that was your one class, and you're done with it. But the right way to think about this is every single opportunity you have to work with data and think about how it can shape your understanding of finance and marketing and human resources and so on. We want you to practice and practice and practice until it's second nature to you, until you're fluent in the use of data in the same way you're fluent in the use of English language.
Right. And I know you mentioned it a little bit, but the data mine learning community, could you share with us what a learning community is for those who might not know?
Yeah, so Purdue offers a lot of different learning communities. They're often tied to a specific dorm in which you might live, although not exclusively. There's some where it's everybody's living together and they're doing a particular program. Others are more more open to folks whether they live in that specific dorm or not. And across the living learning communities, there are some examples where there's kind of a light touch where you're living together and the main thing you have in common might be that you're all in a similar degree program together. And so because you're living close to people who you're in classes with, it's easier to study together and do those kinds of things. But there are other learning communities where they're very intentional about trying to create really special opportunities. And I think that the data mine is an example of this, because it brings together students from all over campus who are interested in how we use the power of data to transform business and society, right? And in many cases, what the coursework that the current faculty run connected to the data mine are focused on solving business problems and basically using that process that I laid out, where you take a business problem, convert it to a data problem, data analysis, and then back to business solutions. In other contexts, people may be interested in other applications of data, and when you're on a campus like Purdue, there are 1,000 different ways that people are using data in a very, very rich way. And so they're all these sort of different groups that give you exposure to the techniques and to the types of to the methods of analysis that are appropriate in those cases, depending on what kind of questions interest you. Some people on campus care a lot about, for example, can I use high fidelity sampling of I
think we lost you, Dean Hummels. I'm sorry, Dean Hummels. I think you're cutting out a little bit.
still
Yeah, if I drop you and you join again, could we try that?
turned off my Wi-Fi and I'm just on LTE. How am I now?
Okay, we'll try that out.
Okay, good. What
Awesome.
was the last person
on? You were talking about if things that people are interested in campus, what they can pursue.
Okay. Some people care about the quality of Wi-Fi connections and how to use data to make them better. But other folks are really interested in things like, how do I use data to improve the quality of healthcare or patient experience? How do I use data to make cities more livable and highways more drivable? So there's a massive number of questions, all of which can be better informed by data. And the key thing from a learning perspective is it's not about doing a problem set where you're grinding through and you're getting to an answer like the number 4. Okay, right. You're learning how to frame questions that are important in the world and figure out how to tackle those open-ended questions. If there's nothing else that you learn in your time at Krannert or at Purdue, it's how do you tackle big open-ended problems that society cares about a great deal. I think we're very good at that.
For sure. I think that you hear a lot on campus too, within Krannert and within Purdue too, that Purdue students are problem solvers. I think that applies pretty well to what you're saying.
It does. You know, I absolutely think so. And I think it takes smart people for sure. It takes an environment in which you provide opportunities, usually experiential, to tackle big open-ended problems. But it also requires a certain ambition and a certain mindset among the students. I mean, let's face it, there's a comfort level in being given an assignment where there's a right answer and there's a wrong answer, and you can walk away from it and you say, I got the right answer. And then you like pat yourself on the back for that, right? The problem is when you get out into the workforce, unfortunately, there isn't a lot of filling out bubble sheets, sort of doing your job by, okay, is this choice A or choice B or choice C? And so if the only thing you come out of high school and college able to do is choose the best one of the above four answers in a well-defined problem, you're not going to get into very interesting jobs, very interesting career progressions. You have to have the ambition and the mindset to put yourself out there a little bit intellectually and say, I'm going to try and tackle something that's a kind of scary because I don't know whether the answer is A or B. The answer might be something crazy, maybe something only you think of. And that's really the power of it.
Right. I know for me specifically, I'm not a numbers guy. It's not my strong suit. But you definitely find that it prepares you not only for the upper division courses at Krannert, but just for real life experiences.
Well, no, I think that's right. And it's not like we're expecting people to be advanced mathematicians, right? I mean, I think the key thing is what our approach is wherever you are when you come to us. Our goal is to help you become comfortable in how it is that business is used to drive that, the data is used to drive business decisions, right?
Right.
And sometimes that might look like people doing the hardcore, number grinding algorithms out there, but there's actually a lot of different roles. Someone who can look at some data and provide an incredibly persuasive visualization that helps folks understand. For example, I'll give you a really concrete example, right? Suppose we want to try and convince more of our employees to opt for a higher retirement contribution as part of their compensation package, right? Generally speaking, we think people don't save enough money. They should be putting away for more for retirement. There are ways to grind through some very, very detailed numbers to show how much better off you'd be if you save 1% more every year, right?
Right.
And you can present that in a very mind-numbing columns and columns of numbers kind of way. But there are people whose job it is to provide really compelling data visualizations that draw on consumer psychology, that draw on the science of perception to help people to understand intuitively what the numbers mean, as opposed to understand them by the application of some formula. Does that make sense?
No, for sure.
And I think what's really cool about the emerging data science in a business context is it's not just about complicated algorithms. It's about the human end of things and how data can help people make better decisions. And that's tied up with a whole bunch of other skills where people might not think about themselves necessarily as mathematicians, but that perception piece is at least as and maybe more important than the other stuff. And so there's lots of different people who can really participate and benefit from those kind of interactions and that kind of training.
And another way that Krannert students can focus on data is through concentrations. I know we offer 10 at Cranert. Could you touch a little bit about the data analytics one?
Yeah. So the data analytics concentration is really designed so that any student, regardless of their major, can get more of an exposure to the different kinds of tools and techniques and practices that we've been talking about. And so one of the things that we encourage students to do is, I honestly think every single one of our students ought to do the data analytics concentration alongside their regular major, because every single one of those majors will be strengthened through the use of that coursework and through the use of the experiences that sort of teach you how to use data in context. So I got to tell you, it's the kind of thing when we have career fairs and we talk to recruiters and you say, I'm a finance major. They're like, great. They're like, I'm a finance major with a data analytics concentration, and their eyes get a little bit bigger, because they understand what that means in terms of enhanced capabilities for the students. And one of the kind of things you'll learn about in business school is the importance of being on brand, right? And recruiters are inclined already to believe that Cranert students have better capabilities of these kinds than other places they might recruit from. And when you reinforce that perception by saying, I did a data science concentration or a data analytics concentration, they're like, wow, this is a student who really took advantage of a particular capability here at Cranert that is better than anywhere else in the world.
Right. And what kind of jobs do those data analytics concentration students, or just students interested in data at Cranert, pursue, and what kind of companies do they go on to work for?
Well, I think it's the strength of the concentration, the strength of this approach is I can't really answer that question because it's everybody, right? It's I would say the more sophisticated the company is, the stronger it is, the more likely they are to value students with these capabilities. But we have yet to run into any serious recruiter from any serious company that says, I don't really care if students have got data analytics capabilities. They all care about it, and so they're all fighting over and competing over these students.
And lots of times too, you hear Cranert students graduate, they start off in the job with the title of an analyst, a business analyst or a marketing analyst or something like that. What does that entail?
Well, I think it depends a lot on the context in which you are, the organizational context a little bit. But in general, you might have students whose initial assignments are focused on providing data analysis around a specific problem, right? So a marketing analyst might be interested in things like, okay, we're making these investments in our social media channel. How many eyeballs are they bringing? How does that translate to the number of customers who are coming in? What does that say about where we should invest our dollars at? Right? So that you might have financial analysts who are trying to understand the flow of funds through the profit and loss statement. So the key thing in all of those instances is you are using the stream of data, whether it's about customers, about your processes, about your finances, and you are learning to shape it into a recommendation or shape it into a perspective on the merits of particular decision making that's already gone on, or that's to understand how one piece of the business operates and understand it in a really granular and detailed way. And the thing is, if you don't have data skills, it's really hard to be successful in those roles. And those roles are really kind of the entry point to really exciting, ways to sort of ladder up in your career.
I'm sorry, there's a bit of a lag. On a more current note, Google and Apple are working together to create an app that is tracking COVID patients who test positive for COVID and those they interact with. Could you tell us a little bit about the limitations you see that having or the benefit it having to society?
This is a really interesting question. So I've been going on and on about the power of data in society and the power of data in business. There are some downsides though, right? So one is companies sometimes know a disturbing lot about what you do, what kind of websites you browse, where you are physically, what things you purchase. And
Right.
even when data is anonymized, if you start pulling together data from 3 or 4 or 5 sources, you can figure out who people are, right? And strip away the veil of privacy. So that at the same time creates really important questions, both for how can companies responsibly use this data and what should be either the business or the social restrictions on what we will and will not do. One of our major points of emphasis at Cranner in the last few years, we put a big emphasis on teaching ethics and on integrating ethics into ethical thinking and ethical conceptual framework into a lot of different courses. And if there's one area where I think business ethics is going to be more important than any other field, it's in where should we and where should we not use data in our business dealings. This is still really evolving, right? Because it's a function not just of laws. What are you permitted to do legally? And there's been some very significant pushback on this in Europe and in the state of California. But it's also about social expectations and norms. Like, am I comfortable if any random person knows what I spend money on in my Amazon account or what I browse online? And I think probably your generation is maybe a little bit more open to having their data shared than my generation is. I don't know that that's necessarily wise in all cases, but it's an example of a changing norm. And
Right.
so I think one of the things that we really have got to grapple with is the distinction between what can we do and what should we do, because those are two very, very different things. And we'll be helping students when they're here, not just to understand the power of data and apps like the one that you mentioned, but the limits and the appropriate limits of their uses.
Right. And going off of that, the Safe Campus Task Force that you're co-chairing is using data and science pretty heavily to make those decisions that have already been announced and ones that are in the works too. Could you tell us how you all rely on that data?
Yeah, sure. So, I think one of the two pieces to this that I think are important. The first is it's really important that you have experts, right? You have people who understand topics at a much more detailed level than what you can pick up in a newspaper column or in a blog post someplace, right? You've got to have experts, and you really realize when you are in an emerging area of science or an emerging area of a social challenge that people who have long experience with similar kinds of problems are better able to weigh new evidence because they have 20, 30, 40 years of experience seeing things come up and understanding them. So I think that's the first thing is we have very heavy reliance on people who have deep expertise in public health and epidemiology and infectious diseases and so on to help us interpret new data flows. The second is, and I think the current situation is unique in my lifetime in that there are an enormous number of scientists of every kind working on this problem. And by that I mean they're public health experts and epidemiologists for sure, people that you'd expect, virologists and those kind of folks. But there's also economists who are thinking very hard about this, and people in other areas of social science, and engineers. We have some bunch of engineers at Purdue who are thinking about air handling as an example. And what that creates is this really interesting situation where in a typical situation, you have a much.
I'm sorry, Dean Hummels, you're lagging a little. I got you now. Thank you. That works.
So there are literally hundreds upon hundreds.
That's okay.
Right back to losing you again. Okay.
No, you're good.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. There are hundreds of new studies coming out every single day about every aspect of this problem. And so what is really unique about the situation is in real time assessing the validity and the impact of these things. For example, wearing masks, right? The amount of science that has come out on the merits of wearing facial coverings in public in the last 3 weeks is equivalent, I think, probably to the last 2 centuries of research on the subject, right? And so as new information comes out, new data comes out, it's incredibly important that we rely on people with a deep experience in assessing this new information and integrating it as part of our decision processes.
And is the task force using data and science found by those professionals on the task force and outside of the Purdue community?
Absolutely. So there are individuals who are working on the task force and on the various implementation teams who themselves are subject area experts. But this is, for all the amazing capabilities at Purdue, there are extremely smart people all over the world. What you will find at a great university is that you are shameless about learning from whoever it is can teach you something valuable. And it's in some cases, faculty can be very powerful because they themselves are the world's expert on a subject,
right?
Or because they know how to sift through the massive amount of information that's out there and select the pieces that are valid and that you can learn the most from. And so we have a lot of people who can do both of those things.
Right, very true. More related to the data for students, for the prospective students interested in data, what kind of coursework or projects do you think they should be working on to be prepared for Krannert?
Yeah, I would say so if we're thinking about, let's say, like rising juniors or rising seniors in high school, I always think for me personally, the most valuable courses I took in high school were computer programming courses. Even though I don't use any of the languages I learned back then, the way to think about organizing problems and structuring the logic of the algorithms, I found as a way of thinking not just about how to code, but how to approach problem solving in general. I think that has stayed with me going back to what I started playing around with coding systems when I was probably 10 years old. And this is like back at the dawn of the PC revolution, right? So this is very old stuff, but that way of thinking about problems has stayed with me through today. The other thing is, if some students are fortunate enough to have statistics coursework in their high schools, if you do, I think stats courses, when taught well, are extraordinarily powerful. And then the last thing that I would say is, if you have opportunities in your coursework to think about making a translation from data to communication, right? How I can look at numbers or how I can look at a graph and how I can translate that into words or into presentations that enable me to think about that translation function. What do these numbers tell us about how the way we
I think that's very true. The coding and the stats classes, I definitely have to agree with that. But just a little bit, but it's all right.
Okay.
No, no worries. Out of your control. I definitely agree with the coding class and the stats class, but I'd also have to say calc. That wasn't something that I took in high school, and it would definitely prepare you more for Craner if you have the opportunity to take that, or at least pre-calc.
All of our students take at least one semester of calculus, and for some that's a big hurdle, and for others not. So absolutely, if you have that option, take it.
Right. So I think we're going to wrap things up. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our followers?
No, I just really appreciate folks for joining in and listening. I think what we've talked about today is just an incredibly important part of the Cranard experience. But it's, I think the reality is we're a little bit different from a lot of schools in our emphasis on this, because we are extremely confident that this is the way the marketplace is going. And so you can either be prepared for it or it can catch you by surprise. And we don't want you to be caught by surprise, which is why we put so much emphasis on helping all of our students, regardless of their backgrounds, to succeed in the use of data in business decision making.
Very true, very true. So quick reminder for our followers, next Thursday we have an Instagram Live with Megan Taylor, who is a recent alum, class of 2019. And then the following Thursday, June 11th, Dean Hummels will join us again to talk about what kind of changes Craner students can expect in the fall. Dean Hummels, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, my pleasure. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you again.
Look forward to seeing you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.